Good evening and welcome to Quorum. This is our 34th season of providing you a direct link to your state legislators. I'm Stephen Caranda. Dozens of Mississippi roadways and bridges are in need of repair, and many of those bridges have been cited as deficient and requiring immediate attention to protect public safety. But maintaining the state's infrastructure needs during tough economic times has become a challenge for legislators. Tonight, leaders of the Senate and House Highways and Transportation Committees talk about road construction, the impact of the state's funding crisis, and how federal stimulus dollars could help improve road conditions. We welcome to the program Senator Tom King, who's the chairman of the Highways and Transportation Committee. He's from Petal and represents District 44 in Forest, Lamar, and Perry counties. Senator King served 6 years in the Mississippi House, and this is his 9th year in the Senate. Also with us is Senator Lee Yancey. Senator Yancey is vice chairman of the Highways and Transportation Committee. He's from Brandon and represents District 20 in Madison and Rankin counties. Senator Yancey is serving his 2nd year in the legislature. From the House, we have Representative Warner McBride, chairman of the House Transportation Committee. Representative McBride is from Cortland and represents District 10 in Lafayette, Panola, and Tallahatchie counties. He's serving his 17th year in the legislature. And Representative Donnie Bell, serving his 2nd year in the legislature. He's vice chairman of the House Transportation Committee. Representative Bell is from Fulton, representing District 21 in Itawamba and Monroe counties. To all of you, welcome. Thanks for coming out tonight.
Thank you for the invitation to be here tonight.
Tonight's conversation will focus on roads and bridges throughout the state, and we want to hear from you. Are there infrastructure needs in your area? If so, join our discussion tonight. The toll-free number from anywhere in Mississippi is 1-877-405-5247. That's 1-877-405-5247. You may begin calling us with your questions for our guests. For those of you on the internet, you can email your questions to quorum@mpbonline.org. Also, tonight's Quorum is being simulcast on MPB Radio. I'd also like to add, for those of you on Twitter, you can follow MPB by going to our website, mpbonline.org, and we'll be taking Twitter questions during the program as well. I'd like to start with sort of an overall look at what's the condition of the transportation infrastructure in Mississippi. Representative McBride, what's your assessment of the infrastructure we have here in the state?
Stephen, as I traveled around, especially in the southeast, you hear a lot of comments from people in the state maybe that our infrastructure is not in good shape, but as you travel in the southeast, you travel to other parts of the country, I think I realize really that we're way ahead of a lot of other states in our transportation, mainly due to the 87 highway program that was instituted, really vaulted us ahead of a lot of other states transportation-wise.
Senator King, would you agree with that assessment?
I do agree. I concur with Senator McBride, Representative McBride, but I feel like as far as the infrastructure, roads and highways, certainly we have needs there, but our bridges really are in disrepair. We need so much work to be done there. Probably it'd take us more than $1 billion just to fix up our bridges. And so we've got a long way to go. It's going to take a lot of funding to do that.
Senator Yancey, what about in your area specifically? Do you see needs on the roads you're driving every day?
Certainly. We have many different transportation needs in my area, basically as a result of a tremendous population growth. Most of the problems that we have are needing more lanes of traffic, needing to accommodate more and more people trying to get from the suburbs into Jackson for work. And so we want to make sure that we continue to fund these growing areas as we see our needs increase.
And Representative Bell, what about in your area specifically? Do you see needs that you'd like to see tackled?
Absolutely. We need more emphasis probably on state aid roads as far as county roads would benefit my district more so, but then funding 25, the completion of 25, which is on the Vision 21, is a major focus of mine.
Senator King, we all remember, you were just mentioning bridges, we all remember the bridge collapse in Minnesota in 2007. As you said, there are bridges here in the state that are classified as deficient. What do they do to monitor those, and what can we possibly improve?
Well, MDOT has to monitor many of those bridges, and I think you'll see more closings and bridges posted this coming year, unfortunately. We just have a dire need out there for bridges and repair, and they need to be shored up, and just lots of things. Some need to be replaced. So again, we have such a amount of bridges, it's just unbelievable. Statewide is an entire problem. Again, we're looking probably over $1 billion just to repair our bridges. So we had $100 million in our big bond bill this year And so we'll have to see where it goes. Mine did not make it in the Senate, but we'll see. We're going to see what happens to Representative McBride's bill, and we'll take it from there.
What's the safety concern with a lot of these bridges? Are they just not able to structurally carry the weight they once were?
Exactly. All these bridges were built in the 20s and 30s, and it's just they're not geared for, say, 84,000 pounds for trucks and vehicles that have a harvest permit. So it's really a no-brainer. We've got to be more careful. We put a big burden on MDOT. Say this is on your watch. You've got to take care of these and watch and make sure that post these bridges. Give fines if needed if people are breaking the law. And again, we will see that happen all over the state. These bridges being closed, and more bridges will be posted this year. It's going to affect not only people with harvest permits, it's going to affect other trucks and vehicles that do hauling.
And Representative McBride, hearing about some of these concerns over bridges in the state, how concerned should people be?
I think they should be very concerned, and I think we're, as legislators, one of our primary responsibilities is public safety, and as leaders in the transportation community, certainly bridges are a major part of public safety. When you leave home in the morning, you want to know that not only that you can travel safely, but that your family travels safely over all these structures, and that they can return home safely. Especially you think about all our children going to school on school buses, and many in the rural areas traveling over a lot of bridges that need some repairs or they need to be replaced. So it's a very serious concern to us.
Is there anything you'd like to see change in the way they're monitored or how they're observed?
No, the Federal Highway Administration has a very strict inspection process where bridges, some of those on the lower end are checked every year, and most of the others are checked at least every other year. So I think we have a very good inspection system, and there's going to be additional requirements now since the bridge fell in Minnesota that you alluded to. So there's going to be more inspectors. We're going to probably add some new employees, and there'll be some additional training to go back and check a lot of these structures in a better way and to ensure safety.
For you two in the Senate, how does the issue of infrastructure in Mississippi play into economic development?
Well, so I think your highways and byways and your roads and highways are certainly economic development. That equals jobs. That's what it's all about. I think if you want to put or give people jobs in our state, well, the highways is the way to go. We ought to immediately start construction, and immediately we should pass this bond bill that Warner McBride and I have offered, and this will get people with that and with the stimulus package. We will absolutely put probably $300 million would put probably about 10,000 people to work. So, to me, that's the fastest way to place people in employment that need work. You know, December we had 20,000 people unemployed. January we had 20,000 people unemployed. February they're predicting 20 more thousand Mississippi unemployed. So we've got our work cut out for us, and it's a long task, but it can be done. But we've got to do it. Again, economic development equals transportation and highways, which equals jobs.
Let's bring a caller into this. Daryl from Vicksburg, go ahead with your question. Daryl, can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead with your question.
Yes. With the economic stimulus package focuses on roads and bridges, I would like to know what is the status of the Highway 27 project, which runs from Warren County to Interstate 55. With Highway 27 being a major commerce route, and also it serves as a evacuation route during hurricane season.
Thanks for the call, Daryl. For you two in the House, looking at a specific highway like that can sometimes be difficult, but what are your thoughts on projects like this?
Yes, it's very difficult, especially this time, thinking about the stimulus package. And we think Mississippi is going to get around $350 million total for transportation needs. About 2/3 of that will actually go towards state highways, with 1/3 of it going more toward the county government and local communities. So we're only, 2/3 of $350 million is really not a whole lot when you really think about it in the big picture. The state highway projects can easily cost anywhere from $50 to $100 million just on one project, a major project. So, but we do think that with the stimulus funds, and we can address some highway needs that we hadn't been able to, thereby taking some pressure maybe off some other funds that we can move into some areas. So hopefully we'll be able to help individuals like Darrell around the state who have some projects that need attention.
For you two in the Senate, you may not know that highway project specifically, but Darrell was mentioning that this is an evacuation route. That's something to also consider with these roads, isn't it?
Absolutely. That would be a priority, I believe. I know with our highway departments, no doubt about it that it's needed and it should be utilized as such, but it is a priority as far as the repair.
We were talking just a minute ago about how economic development and infrastructure sort of go in hand. Representative McBride, for example, with Nissan, with Toyota projects like that, is infrastructure a big part of getting those large corporations and those large businesses coming to the state?
Definitely. A poll I saw recently showed transportation as a #2 indicator of attracting economic development to an area behind the cost of labor. So transportation is definitely a major player in where you attract jobs. You can look at the Nissan project on Interstate 55. You can go up to Toyota. If we hadn't had the 87 program when we did and put highways in northeast Mississippi, I don't think there's any question that Toyota would not be sitting in the Tupelo area.
When you look at, for example, you were just talking about Toyota, is it something where they might be working a deal between the state and a company and improving the highways would be part of that, or do you need to also look at the entire state infrastructure and just have it sort of as efficient as it can be?
I think we need to try to have it as efficient as we can be, and certainly when an industry wants to come locate in your state, you try to locate them or steer them where you already have the infrastructure in place, but many times that's just not the case because of other factors. So we try to work, our Department of Transportation, which we think very highly of, and our Mississippi Department of Economic Development, Mississippi Development Authority, we also have a lot of respect for. They work well together and to try to accommodate companies that weren't coming in the state to address their transportation needs.
Let's bring another caller into this. We've got Roy from Petal. Go ahead with your question. Can you hear me, Roy?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Go ahead with your question.
Other states are setting up websites to show how money for infrastructure is going to be spent from the stimulus. Is Mississippi going to do this as well?
Thanks for the call, Roy. For you two in the Senate, how is the state getting this information out to the citizens?
Well, certainly through the media. You know, as our representative said, that we're getting 33% from the stimulus package to counties and cities. That therefore you've got the Highway Department or MDOT will have to take care of the rest. But through the media and through, of course, the local stations and offices in different districts that we have throughout the state.
And Senator Yancey, do you know, are there this money that's going to be coming to the state, I guess for both of you in the Senate, are there restrictions on how it can be spent on these types of road projects?
I yield to Senator
Well,
King on that.
first of all, you had to qualify to get the money or receive the money. We qualified we had 75 projects. With that, you had to have environmental impact study and you had to have bought the right-of-way. And with that, we had 75 projects amounted to about, on the high side of $600 million. We only received 350 or 355 million. So, and they're only receiving two-thirds of that, and the third of that goes to counties and cities. So, with that said, they'll take it on a priority basis, and it'll be equally distributed throughout the state in each district. There's 3 districts in the state.
Is it then up to MDOT? Are they pretty influential in this process also?
Well, MDOT will have to go by what the government, to accept the money, you've got to go by the qualifications, what we qualified for. And in doing so, they'll go to it by, just as the law says, and they'll certainly abide by the law and do what they're supposed to do.
Senator King was talking earlier about all of the impact this can have, hopefully, for employment. For both of you, what are you hoping this employment can do when these projects get going? What would you like to see happen in the state?
I'd see employment increased, certainly, and I think we look at studies nationally, and I think Senator King was just right on target for the amount of money that we're talking about putting out there. We could have up to 10,000 new jobs across the state, and that'll have a tremendous impact on Mississippi. And not to counter all the supplies, when you're talking about building highways, you're talking about dirt contractors, sand and gravel, asphalts, purchases of steel, just on and on. So it'll have a trickle-down effect and involve a lot of people, a lot of industry in Mississippi. And it can happen fast. That's the good thing about the transportation. We have the contractors in this state We don't have to have out-of-state contractors to come in. We have our own people who can do this, and it'll make they can purchase fuel, equipment, be parts. It'll just be a quick impact, an economic stimulus to Mississippi.
Mm-hmm. Representative Bell, in your area, what is the employment situation? You're hoping this can have an impact in your district?
Absolutely. In northeast Mississippi, the unemployment rate's at about 11%, and anything we can do to create jobs in that part of the country, we need to, or that part of the state. And people are hurting, and the stimulus packages will hopefully help put some people back to work.
We've got another caller, David from Lauderdale County. Go ahead with your question.
How are you gentlemen doing tonight? I'd like to know, is there any restrictions on this stimulus program that you can use as far as transportation? Are you prohibited from using a certain part of the area? And also in East Mississippi, I'm in Meridian, when are they going to finish double laning that road from Philadelphia on in, from Collinsville on into Philadelphia? And do y'all favor this stimulus package? And I'll hang up listening. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for the call, David. You were just touching on this, Senator King. What are some of the restrictions, again, on how this money can be spent in Mississippi?
Well, again, you have to go by the qualifications and the projects that they presented to the federal government. So you're pretty well restricted to what you can do and where you can use the money. So, if you have a project, there are some overlay projects, but again, if the right-of-way is bought and if you have environmental impact study, then you can use it. Again, they submitted 75 projects, and that's where it will go. The project he's talking about, I believe, is one of those projects that will be on the stimulus package. I'm hoping I'm not wrong, but I think they're going to do it pretty soon. Keep in mind now, the stimulus money this is going to go quickly. And there's two phases of this. Phase one is what they're into now, and we'll be letting jobs soon, or letting contracts soon. So we're only talking about maybe a year, maybe a little longer, and that's it. And that's why, and very little of that is bridge work. So that's why we have the responsibility as legislators to pass, whether it takes a bond or issue or bridge money, and we need bridges. God forbid if something happened in Minnesota, happened here in Mississippi. And we don't want that, especially when you have these new 72 passenger school buses. So we don't need that. We certainly don't want that. We're going to do everything we can to keep that from happening. Senator
Yancey, David also mentioned he wanted to know what some of your thoughts were generally on the stimulus package. For you, Senator Yancey, what were you thinking when it started being put together?
The stimulus package is something that is reality for us now. And whether or not we would have opposed it or supported it is really irrelevant at this point. There is a stimulus package. It is coming, and Mississippi is going to receive a share of that stimulus. And it's important for us to strengthen our infrastructure. And one thing about highways and bridges and airports and rail, all of these things are something when we invest in for our state, we have something to show for it. We have something that's going to be there for our children and grandchildren to use. And I think that is very significant. In my district, I have a couple of huge businesses, Ergon and AdCamp, who provide asphalt for all these kinds of projects. And so this is going to be very stimulating to our economy, and we're excited about that. Also, when we're talking about attracting major economic development groups, they're looking for sites that have access to interstate highways and rail and airports. And so the more we can provide that kind of infrastructure throughout our state, the better we're going to be suited to gain more of these projects being located here. And so we're looking forward to that.
One thing that we haven't touched on really very much so far is rail. Representative McBride, how is the stimulus package really going to play into the issue of rail in Mississippi?
Well, it could play a very prominent role in the stimulus package. I'm going to talk about passenger rail a minute. There's $8 billion for high-speed rail. And we're not really a high-speed rail state per se, I guess, but we do have Amtrak services, which I believe might qualify under that different proposal. And we belong to a compact of states with Louisiana and Alabama with the Rapid Rail Commission, High-Speed Rail Commission, who is taking a look at that. They're looking at a corridor along the Gulf Coast to try to get that corridor going again. After Hurricane Katrina, that line was closed down, and we hadn't been able to get it reopened yet. So that's one of the things that we would like to do. There's also a gap in passenger rail between Atlanta and Dallas, and if we could somehow get that included one day in federal legislation, maybe that high-speed rail would pass through Meridian, Jackson, Vicksburg, which would be very important to our state. And we have some very important rail legislation pending, something that would require MDOT to put together a rail plan for both passenger rail and freight rail. And we do have a little funds in for some high-speed rail to show the nationals that we are interested in high-speed rail in Mississippi, and we're committed to that. And we're also looking at some other abandoned lines and maybe in some ways to help short line rails in Mississippi. So we are looking at alternative methods of travel.
And when looking, you were talking about passenger rail, but when looking at freight rail, does that have some of the same influence on businesses wanting to move to the state? Is it one of the things that can help attract them?
It does. And last year, the House Transportation Committee had a hearing on alternative travel, and when energy prices reached the $4 and $5 per gallon level, then alternative methods of travel and alternative methods of moving freight became a very prominent topic of discussion. So our Transportation Committee got very interested in that topic and have been trying to address that issue.
Let's bring another caller into this. Robert from Pascagoula. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, my question is, I'm an independent trucker, live in Mississippi, and my question is, there's so many people that's going to be hauling dirt in, they're going to be hauling rails and iron and all this kind of stuff. What stimulus package do we have for the people that's not hauling this kind of product? I mean, chemical plants are down, food products are down. I want to know what are the independent truckers going to do? How do we get involved in this? How can we help ourselves?
Thanks for the call, Robert. For you two in the Senate, is there a way that people can get involved in these type of projects?
Well, normally you contract on those, or they put these things out for bid, whether it's rail or truck, and they do both, and it's done on a contract basis. I would suggest to Robert that he would need to contact a particular company or companies and see what the bid process is and go through the bid process.
And for you two in the House, these are, I'm assuming, exactly the type of people you were hoping could be helped by the stimulus package. The average worker maybe get involved in these projects, provide some jobs and some work.
Right, and we would hope that they would certainly have a prominent role to play in construction and upgrading construction in Mississippi and increasing the volume, and hopefully that'll put a lot of them back to work. And we're very concerned about the trucking industry, and we know that they're going through a difficult time, and any way we can help them, we'd sure like to do that.
We were talking just a moment ago about rail, and in your committee earlier this week there was a hearing where some people were talking about reopening a rail line in North Mississippi with the goal of hopefully getting some more development. Do you two agree that rail can really play into the economic development here in Mississippi?
I think rail certainly can play in economic development. For instance, in my district, we have Nucor Steel located there that is a great recycler of steel and other metals, and we have the Kansas City Southern Railroad that runs from Vicksburg all the way across to Meridian and then up to West Point and services Severstal. And rail plays a huge role in the way that we market our products and get them to the place where they can be used. And so, I think it's important that we have rail infrastructure, in place so that our businesses can prosper.
And Senator King, we were talking just a minute ago about passenger rail. How do you hope this passenger rail can expand here in Mississippi?
I think it's going to be a chore just to get it through and get it done. But I feel like it's certainly needed. We need to restore the New Orleans route from New Orleans to Hattiesburg to Mobile, I believe, to Pensacola. We'd like to restore that and keep that going. But it's a lot's needed. I think we have certainly neglected the rail through the years in the past, in our entire intermodal system, as far as using our waterways and our rail also. So I think with money, it just takes funding everything that we're talking about here, and we're willing to do it. But we only have so much money in Mississippi that can go around. But we're certainly geared that way. I know that Chairman McBride and I have talked about this. We're going to be doing everything we can to enhance the rail system.
Representative Bell, we were talking about some of the businesses, for example, in Senator Yancey's district. In your area of the state, North Mississippi, there is a good amount of manufacturing. What are the types of businesses that could maybe be impacted by the rail improvements in your area?
Well, the rail line between West Point and Greenville that's being proposed, that has been abandoned, could be very beneficial to northeast Mississippi, and it would tie the Tenn-Tom waterway to the Mississippi River almost right across the middle of the state, which would open up a lot of avenues for economic development, and we're very much supportive of that. And it just, anytime you add rail lines, it promotes economic development and the future for more businesses to come in. It's another avenue of transportation that they might not have in other areas of the state. So,
we've got another caller, Mary from Edwards. I hope I've got the town right. Go ahead with your question.
I just wanted to get a timeline on when this money will be available, when the first jobs can be produced for our state, and will we have to repay this to the government like these other people that are being loaned the money? Thank you.
Thank you for the call, Mary. An issue I was just thinking about myself. Representative McBride, what is the time frame on some of these jobs and projects?
I think the money is expected to begin to come in the state around the 1st to the 15th of May, somewhere in that area. The first part of May is what we're looking at. Of course, as Senator King mentioned a while ago, these projects had different qualifications, and then one of those were projects that had to be let with at least in 180 days. So MDOT right now is making all the preparations to let the contracts just as soon as we know for sure that we're going to get the money. Of course, there's also an issue with the governor. He has to, actually request the money, and then it can maybe start flowing once he makes that request. So we hope to get it going as fast as possible, and we need for him to go ahead and make that request, especially as we begin now to get into our budget process and get ready to set our budget for the next year. We need to know how much money that we're going to have available to us.
And Senator King, as you're watching for those dollars to come in, Mary was wondering if this is money that we have to pay back, and I'm assuming this isn't.
This is not money we have to pay back, Mary, so it'll be good. It'll be certainly used well as far as economic development. They'll sing, build it, and they'll come. Well, I tell you, we've got a good road system, and we need a lot of improvements, and we'll continue to make those improvements in her area as well as all of our areas, hopefully. But we'll just have to see what happens. But we need the governor to make that request where we can receive that money as soon as possible.
Because there is an issue of time limits on these dollars, isn't
That's correct.
What is the time limit?
There's a time limit. Well, the first phase, I think it's December of 2010.
That's correct. And
maybe the second phase, I'm not for sure. So it's a big turnaround, a fast turnaround, and so we've got to utilize it. And that's why we need to have monies ahead. When they get through, we need to start some more roads and shore up some more bridges, and hopefully we can get. I keep pushing this bond. Hopefully we can get this bond that we need so badly, and that can be used. And again, it keeps people working, and keeps jobs. We've got contractors out there that have cut employees, cut their hours to 3 days, some maybe 4 days at the most. So a lot of people are hurting out there, and this is a quick way that we can address the issue of unemployment.
We've got a call from James in Charleston. James, thanks for calling Quorum. Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to know if some of this stimulus money would be used for the completion of Interstate 69. And if so, we don't have a big truck stop here to handle the traffic. That's what I was wondering if the business people had some kind of cue of what was going on.
Thanks for the call, James. A lot of questions about specific roadways. I know that can be tough, but looking at Interstate 69, what's the situation there?
I don't know that the stimulus funds will be used for Interstate 69. Interstate 69 has been funded thus far through the HELP bond program that we have through the Department of Transportation, and that gets in the local government and involves them in that program. Tunica County has participated in that program and built a section of I-69 from Interstate 55 west to Highway 61, and now MDOT is going to take that east and then turn north up into Tennessee through DeSoto County and Marshall County, and both those counties are participating with the state in the HELP bond program, and those are currently the environmental work is being done, and the preliminary design is being done on that stretch of highway.
Senator King was talking just a moment ago about some bond issues. You were the author, if I'm correct, about a bond bill in the House for around $300 million.
That's correct.
What would that do?
Senator King and I each had one for the same amount that we've both been working together on throughout the past year, and we had a number of meetings. I think we began in May of last year, meeting with different advocacy groups and the Department of Transportation, different contractors and just interested citizens around the state to try to come up with a proposal to address the infrastructure needs of the state of Mississippi. So we each had a $300 million bond bill that we introduced to try to help with that. And especially looking back at last year, all of the input costs to build our highways was going up. All the infrastructure costs was going up. The fuel cost was up, so people were using less fuel, so our amount of fuel tax was going down. So we're having a problem meeting all of our funding requirements that we need. So we felt like this bond bill would be a good supplement.
Some people might be just hearing us talk about the millions we're getting from the federal government. Why do we still need this bond bill?
Like we talked about a while ago, Mississippi will end up about $350 million. The Department of Transportation here will get 2/3 of that, which is roughly about $240 million. I know of one project that needs to be done in northeast Mississippi to get Highway 78 up to interstate standards to conform it to Interstate 22. That one project alone is $70 million. So it doesn't take a lot of those type projects to spend the funds that we have. And we need other funds to go out and all over this state to address the bridge concerns that we've been talking about. We're trying to take our 87 highway program to the new program that we passed in 2002 called Vision 21. We need the funds to implement it as well to start our new highway program.
Representative Bell, I know the finances are definitely tight this session for the legislature. Have you been hearing from a lot of people that they're in support of bond bills like this issue?
Well, I think so. The bottom line is at the cost of construction, especially like for four-lane construction, being somewhere between $10 and $15 million per mile for new road construction, when you're putting $200 million into a project, that's not going to go very far. So if we're going to fund our highways, we've got to come up with some source of funding those highways. And, the bond bill, I would have liked to seen it even more, because at the rate that we're going right now, the 25s, the 15s are not going to be built in my lifetime if we continue the funding sources the way we're funding those highways right now.
And Senator King, you were talking about this bond issue a couple of times so far during the program. I know Senator Kirby has wanted to keep bond bills down and use as few as possible. What are your hopes that can happen with this?
Well, I think the last time that we bonded a highway bill was in 1999, and I believe MDOT paid with that with, I stand to be corrected, maybe with some monies that they had or grant monies and maybe federal money, so it's different sources. So I think it was $100 million. So I feel like we, as Mississippians, we cannot stand and wait for the federal government to keep giving us and feeding us money. We've got to stand up as Mississippians and invest in Mississippi for our highways. If we want to keep moving in a progressive state, we've got to do that. Invest in ourselves, and let's get the job done, and we can do it. It costs a lot of money, but we all know that money's going to turn over probably 7 or 8 times. It just doesn't. Just because the contractor gets a contract, do you realize how many times it will turn over? The financial institutions, the vendors, the suppliers, equipment people, it goes on and on. Again, that means jobs, and that's what we need in Mississippi, that's jobs.
You mentioned your estimate could be up to $1 billion to improve some of our bridges here in the state. With this $300 million, and is that going to be enough to put a dent in some of these projects?
We had $100 million in my bond bill. We had $100 million in there, and then we had $180 million for divided equally amongst the 3 districts, and then we had $20 million there for a state aid road. So I feel like it's just going to take much more than that, but that's a start. Whether we can continue to bond that as a state, I don't know. Past the 300, I feel like we can. Many legislators think we can. Some would say, "Hey, I would do this for $1 billion." Well, we've got to be practical, and there's a lot of needs out there other than just highways. But highways are vital to our economy, and to keep our economy going, we've got to furnish them and fund them money.
Senator Yancey, do you have the same kind of support that Senator King has for a bond issue like this?
Well, when I think about bonds are debt, and so anytime that we support a bond, we are supporting debt. And I'm a big Dave Ramsey fan. I'm a fiscal conservative. But one of the things that we do as families is usually we buy a house, and normally we have to have a house note. And I look at funding our infrastructure with our highways and bridges as similar to having a house note. It's something that we we have to have. It's something that we need. This is not a want, this is a need. And by creating better roads and bridges throughout our state, like Senator King said, it's going to produce so much more economic activity, and it's going to be something that provides safety to our families, to our children, and also something that helps produce more money for our district, for those who are in the trucking business, those who are logging, those who are going from place to place. I mean, we have to have good roads. And so I think it's vital that we have a bond bill that takes care of these needs.
We've got an email from James in Jones County, who I think is a little displeased. It says, I am so tired of your guests talking out of both sides of their mouths. If our roads and bridges are in such bad shape, why did the House vote to raise the weight limit on the very roads and bridges they said were in such disrepair? Please ask them why they voted to raise the weight limit and put our children and school buses in such danger. I know it passed the House, but I don't know about the Senate. What did the House do, Representative McBride, touching on raising the weight limit issue?
The House voted to increase the harvest permit. Those who use the harvest permit, which is now $84,000, voted to increase it to $88,000. And I think they did this realizing that there was a bond bill out there, and the House overwhelmingly approved the bond bill because they wanted to address the bridges and the other highway needs that we have. But they also understand how most people who use the harvest permit are in agriculture-related industries, and they understand how bad they're hurting. We're in extraordinary times right now. The economy that we have in this state and in this nation is nothing like we've seen since the time of the Great Depression. It's an extraordinary time. So I think the House thought it was time to take extraordinary measures and try to help the #1 industry in this state.
And are these, I know in my home state of Iowa, they increase the weight restrictions during a certain time of year, I think almost every year. Is this a temporary measure?
Well, right, we had it set up for 2 years to just try it and see how it would go. And we just wanted to maybe do a little study on it for a couple of years and see how big an impact it had and see what kind of effect it actually had on our bridges and roads. You know, there were a lot of people were preaching doom and gloom, but nobody could really substantiate how much damage that it might do to our roads. So we wanted to try it a little bit and try to help out Mississippians during these difficult times.
Senator King, has the Senate touched on this issue, or are they going to be maybe looking at it?
We have touched on the issue. The Senate's position is not to raise weight limits. It's a public safety issue for us, and we feel like it should remain at 84,000 pounds. You know, the loggers really wanted the weight raised, but we feel for them and all the other folks that's out there that would like to see that. But with the way the bridges are and some of our roads, it's a public safety issue with us, and we don't think it should happen. On the interstate, you can only have 80,000 pounds. And so, and on the bill that the House did send us, it was 88,000 pounds, raised 4,000 pounds with up to a 10% tolerance factor, which would exceed that, make it 96,000 pounds if it was used. So we just stand firm in our position, and we feel like it should be 84,000 pounds.
We've got another caller I'd like to bring into the program. Willie from Petal, go ahead with your question.
Hello. I would like to ask why we are building a half-a-mile concrete bridge across the Pearl River Swamp in White Bluff, Mississippi, and when are we going to finish the Evelyn Gandy Parkway east of Petal? Thank you.
Thank you for the call, Willie. Representative McBride, are you familiar with those projects at all?
Not real familiar. That's a little bit out of my area. I'm basically aware of them, but Senator King would probably tell you more about that than I could.
Senator King,
closer to him.
Do you know anything about these projects?
The bridge, I do not know, not for sure the reason. I certainly will find out. The Evelyn Gandy Parkway Phase 3, the contract should be ready to let hopefully in the summer. That's what I was told by the Mississippi Department of Transportation, and I feel like it'll happen. They said spring or the summer. There's a project going in front of Petal High School right now where a signal light has been installed, and they've got a 5-lane there in front of the school. And when that project is completed, then they're supposed to be ready to let that job with the rest of Phase 3 of the Gandy Parkway going to east of Butchie and Sunrise Road. It should be let this summer.
Charles from Hattiesburg has called into the program. Charles is not there anymore. I apologize about that. We were just talking about the bond issue. I was talking to Senator Yancey about it. Do you think there's going to be enough support in the Senate to bring this all the way through?
I do not. My bill did not make it, and unfortunately tomorrow we're going to have 2 meetings, or really one meeting and taking up 2 bills, and one of them will be the bond bill, and I'm going to pass it. So it's a House bill, and we're going to pass it. We may make a strike all, but we're going to pass it on to finance. It's a double referred bill, and we have to move it on because I believe the deadline's Tuesday. It has to be on the calendar by Tuesday. So that will be up to the other chairman.
We've got Billy from Kosciuszko on the phone. Go ahead with your question, Billy.
Yes, sir. In the past, highway grants were used in Mississippi, and it was found that highway grants was more economical than highway bonds because you have to eventually pay the bonds off. When the federal government pays a grant to build the roads, why doesn't the state go back to the grant system that the federal government offers?
Thanks for the call, Billy. Representative McBride, my thought would be with the grants versus bonds, we can only get a limited number of grants. Is that correct?
Right. Well, we'd love to have some grants, and we wish we knew where they were available. But since I've been in the legislature, the grants have been few and far between. We try to grant some things in Mississippi to the counties, like the local system bridge program that we've had in place right about 15 years now, where we put $20 billion a year out for the county government for bridges that don't qualify for federal funds or for state funds.
I guess we would be pleased here in Mississippi if there were unlimited federal grants, probably, wouldn't we?
Absolutely. Since the Iraq War, the grants have been far and few between, unfortunately.
And it depends on how many strings were attached to it.
There's another issue that I wanted to touch on. Recently, passed legislation would restrict eminent domain. I believe this has been sent to the governor. Senator King, would this affect construction of new roads in Mississippi? I believe the bill was mostly aimed at eminent domain for businesses.
I think, in my opinion, no, it will not restrict. It will not restrict. I think it'll just move forward. I think it's certainly addresses the property rights of individual owners of property, but I don't see a problem there.
Representative McBride, does the eminent domain issue come into play a lot when you're looking at these road projects?
It does. It comes into play a lot. If you want to build a project, maybe if it's 2 miles or if it's 10 miles, there are always individuals that are adversely affected, and anybody that's owned a piece of property very long gets some attachment to it, and none of us want to see our property go away. Even though we all want to see our area enhanced, I think. But there are always individuals who are adversely affected and who are opposed to a project, and there is a process set up for them through eminent domain where they can be fairly compensated when that project comes through.
There have recently been a couple bills coming through the legislature that deal with the safety on Mississippi's roads. For example, one would limit cell phone use for some drivers. Representative Bell, do you see bills like this limiting cell phone use, some of those types of things? Can they be effective at improving the safety, you think, on Mississippi's roads?
Well, anything you do can be somewhat effective. I would be opposed to restricting cell phone use personally. Now, we did pass legislation earlier this week that limited texting on cell phones for beginning drivers or people that's under their learning permit till age 16. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
That's our youngest drivers, and we felt like till they learn a lot more about the road, that's the ones where the most accidents are. So we passed that legislation. But me personally, I would be opposed to limiting cell phone use for adults.
For you two in the Senate, what does the Senate look at regarding increasing the safety on Mississippi's roads? Is that something you think you can be effective at?
I think it can be effective. I think the text messaging that Mr. Bell just talked about is certainly will be effective for the younger drivers. We're number 2 in the whole country as far as deaths going for young people, so I think that's one way to address that issue. It's not for government to oversee everything in one's life, because what are you going to do? I mean, we all eat like a hamburger or go to a fast food restaurant and eat a hamburger and still drive. So in the same way with your cell phones, you're still going to talk on the cell phone. But I think text messaging is definitely a little different, and I think we need to address that with young people, and if not, address it with adults also. I don't have a problem with that at all. I think we should do that. I think we should absolutely abide by that and carry it even further with adults.
Representative McBride, what would you like to see happen on these types of road safety issues?
I think we need to take a closer look at them, and I think the end of this past term, we instituted the primary seatbelt law. This past year, we passed the booster seat law, and this year we were looking at the graduated driver's license, which included the prohibition of texting for 15 and 16-year-olds. So I think the legislature as a whole has become more focused on safety issues, much more than they were when I first came to the legislature.
Another issue, I believe this has now passed both chambers, bills that would effectively ban traffic cameras. What are your thoughts on that issue, Representative McBride?
We've had some, as you can probably realize, some very interesting discussions on traffic cameras, and we also had joint hearings on traffic cameras during this past year. And personally, I felt like, and there's really two very distinct sides of this issue. I felt like that the cities ought to be able to do this under home rule, but I also thought that they ought to have some regulations, and we ought to talk about where the income is going on those different traffic cameras. But obviously my colleagues in the legislature felt like that it was something that didn't need to be done, and so now the total ban has been instituted, and that's now headed to the governor to see if he is willing to sign that measure.
I'd like to get your thoughts in the Senate, but first, just to explain a little bit for people who aren't familiar, these would be usually traffic cameras that would, for example, get photos of people running stoplights, and then there would be tickets sent to their house. For you two in the Senate, what are your thoughts on this issue?
Well, I feel like it's really should not be done. You not get due process. You know, if you're in a funeral and you go through the light and there's a policeman there, you get a ticket. If you cross a white solid line and you back up, you still get a ticket. Some people think they stop before they stop and then go red. They may or may not. Most people do or slow down quite. But quite frankly, I think the Senate and the House spoke very loud and clear on this issue. I think the vote in the House was 116 with 4 dissenting votes. In the Senate, it was 49 to ban it, 1 no, and 1 voted present. So we spoke loud and clear. Now, regarding the home rule, we're all for home rule here, but sometimes, you know, it just appears that this is a revenue generator from our hearings, is what many of us receive from this, and not a public safety issue. You've got some law enforcement people for it, some are against it. You've got people in different states, such as Minnesota and Arizona, that's removing this equipment, camera. So with all of that said and done, I think we made the right decision. I've never seen an issue where such an outcry by the public demanding that we do something about it. And I feel like, again, on the home rule, if its appearance if it's misused or abused, then the legislature needs to step in and take care of the matter.
Senator Yancey, I don't know if they have them in your district, but we do have them here in the Jackson area, I believe. What are your thoughts on the traffic camera issue?
I hate traffic cameras, and I've made no bones about it. I've been one of the chief ones trying to pull them down off of those poles. I think it's too much Big Brother. I think it's government interference. I think that they many times make a judgment call, and it's always in favor of the out-of-state company. Out-of-state companies are making millions of dollars off of these cameras. They are, you know, I don't think they belong there. I don't think we want them there. And
well, what about some of the people who are arguing these can reduce accidents and increase safety?
There are studies that show that they decrease accidents. There are studies that show they increase accidents because people are slamming on their brakes trying to stop before the traffic camera catches them, and people are hitting them from behind. So I think whichever side you're predisposed to, you can find the study that backs up your philosophy. I personally think it's too much Big Brother, too much government, and we don't need them.
Representative Bell, being in the North Mississippi area, the senators were just talking about getting a lot of response on this issue. What are you hearing from constituents?
Oh, absolutely. And I can't say any more than he said, and I totally agree with him. We've got enough Big Brother like it is, and the traffic cameras just added more to it. So I'm glad we passed it.
Let's bring another caller into this. Joe from Hazelhurst, go ahead with your question.
Yes. Recently they talked about helping rail passengers. In the past, a few years ago, Amtrak wanted to put a commuter train from Mobile to New Orleans, but Louisiana and Alabama agreed to help fund it. Mississippi did not. Also, Amtrak wants to put a train from Meridian to Dallas, and it takes many states are subsidizing these routes, and I was wondering if Mississippi at considering helping with these projects?
Senator King, think Mississippi's maybe more open to this issue now?
I think it is now. In the past, I don't think we were, unfortunately, but I think it's certainly a means in motor travel with the fuel the way it is, and energy, the prices will probably be going up next year is what we're hearing. I think it's certainly, they received our attention. Mayor Smith and Meridian, they've done an excellent job with their rail system up there, as others have, but we do need to continue to work on this and improve our rail system.
And Representative McBride, you think we're seeing more interest in this now? Fuel prices have gone back down somewhat, but they were higher earlier. That affected a lot of people. Do you think Mississippi's more open to the rail issue now?
I think Mississippi is definitely open for the rail issue. On our House Transportation Committee, there are 29 members, and an overwhelming majority of members of the committee came to me early in the session and asked us to try to focus more on rail, not only passenger rail but freight rail, and really try to address that in this state. And that's why we have a bill that left the House that had $3.5 million in it for high-speed rail, because we thought people were so interested in that, to try to make some statement to show that interest from the House members. And we know that's a long-term proposal. You know, we're probably looking out 50 years, maybe even 100 years out. You know, we're trying to look long-term and be futuristic about rail in Mississippi. It's not something that's going to happen in the next couple of years, but we do have to start making the plans for rail in Mississippi.
Let's bring another caller into this. Jimmy from Amory, go ahead with your question.
My question is, will the traffic cameras that are being banned also be include the ones that's in the cars of law enforcement?
Thank you for the call, Jimmy. Would that include, for you two in the Senate, would that play into this issue at all?
No. It's the intent of the bill and the legislature is for traffic signals only. And it's pretty clear. It describes and gives a description of equipment relating to traffic signals. It will not harm law enforcement vehicles in any other device. Even the toll roads, it came up toll roads. It does not specifically talk about toll roads in this particular bill, but with the toll road bill we had last year, it does. So it's very clear the intent of the bill, what it's for, what it does, and it all relates to the traffic signals.
We've got an email here from Alex from Vicksburg who says there is as much or a greater need for repair and construction of county roads and bridges than funding construction of low-volume 4-lane state highways throughout the state, like Highway 25. Is the state going to help push more money down to the counties? That's from Alex in Vicksburg. Representative McBride, there is going to be money coming down from the stimulus package to the local governments, is that correct?
There will be some, and Alex is correct. Local governments never seem to get their share. It just doesn't trickle down far enough when it starts to the feds, and they get a little bit of it, and then the states get a little bit of it, and then by the time it gets to the counties and cities, it's pretty diluted. But we do have the state aid road system that provides funds out to the counties. We do have the local system bridge program that provides funds to the counties. I think right now state aid has about $12.5 million of stimulus funds coming to them that we know about right now. There could be some other discretionary funds out there. And then in our bond bill that we keep talking about, we have an additional $20 million in there for state aid bridge work as well. So we're trying to focus on them more than maybe sometimes in the past. Senator King, is there going to be, you think, enough money that makes it down to those localities to improve some of these situations?
With the stimulus package, yes. I think it's 33%, and so that's over $100 million, and it'll be spread out, I think, probably on a priority basis. I believe that's how it's distributed. So they'll have monies there they've never had before. Plus, you know, I believe in the budget of MDOT, there's 23% of that goes to state aid roads. So out of $1 billion, you've got 23% of that going to state aid roads, plus 4% goes to non-transportation. So as you can see, then that's what's left for the Department of Transportation to use on highways and roadways. And when you're looking at $7 million a mile, it doesn't really go long like it did in the 87 program. So we're doing everything we can for our local people, and we will continue.
Representative McBride, with the stimulus money coming down, the possibility of a bond bill, where do you really hope the infrastructure in Mississippi can go in the future? Do you think it needs a complete revamp, or does it just need some tweaking?
Probably somewhere in between a tweaking and a revamp. You know, we want to drive a Cadillac, but we can't always. Sometimes we have to drive a Chevrolet. So, but we want to do the best that we can, and we do have a good highway system here in Mississippi. But obviously it is time now to change programs, to go from the 87 program to the Vision 21 program. And when we do that, it's just going to continue to improve our highway infrastructure in the state of Mississippi. And we will continue to be a leader in transportation in the Southeast.
Representative Bell, we were talking about at the beginning of the show specific areas of the state. What would you like to see improve in your area?
Well, Highway 25 is the main focus between Amory and really the Tennessee line. It's we have the community college there at Fulton and a lot of traffic on that road, and it's a 2-lane road, and it's really dangerous for those people. So 25 is very important in my area.
Senator King, Representative McBride was just talking about where he'd like to see transportation in the state go. Where do you hope that these new projects can bring transportation in Mississippi?
Where it can bring transportation in Mississippi? Where the biggest need is, and that's your areas that's high growth. We've got to have them. There's traffic jams everywhere, and whether it's in South Mississippi or North Mississippi, we've got to address those areas. And of course, the Vision 21 program is kind of a pay-as-you-go program. We didn't fund it like we did the 87 program, so it's different. And I think we've got to address that and get a better funding formula for that.
We've got to cut you off there. I apologize. That's all the time we have for tonight's program. I'd like to thank our guest Senators Tom King and Lee Yancey and Representatives Warner McBride and Donnie Bell. We also thank you for joining the discussion tonight and hope you will join us next week for Quorum. Our guests will be leaders of the House and Senate Corrections Committees. Also, tonight's program will be available for viewing on our website beginning tomorrow. That's mpbonline.org. I'm Stephen Caranda. Good night.